Hello, and welcome to our Community Chats podcast. Building inclusive communities starts with being honest about how our systems and workplaces show up for people. In this episode, I sit down with two of CLTO's staff members, Britney and Lee. We had a thoughtful conversation about what equity, belonging, and inclusion looks like in practice. We talk about their paths into this work, how the EDI effort shows up in the day-to-day experiences of people with intellectual disabilities and their families, and what it takes for them both professionally and personally to keep doing this work well. As we recognize Black History Month in February, we reflected on the importance of moving beyond reflection and into action, including the role of employee resource groups like our Black Brilliance Network, and how learning together can strengthen how we support the people and communities that we serve. This is a thoughtful conversation about progress, accountability, and what it means to keep moving this work forward together. So today I'm joined by Britney Bryan and Lee Smith, a couple of stellar, fantastic community Living Toronto staff, and we're here to talk about Black History Month, which is in February again this year. We're going to talk about the work that they do with Community Living Toronto, as well as some work that they do on one of our employee resource groups that we started a number of years ago. So it is my privilege to welcome Britney and Lee. Welcome.
Thank you so much. That's here.
Yeah, really appreciate you agreeing to do this. Want to start off by learning a little bit about you both. I know you've both been at Community Living Toronto and had different roles, but maybe Lee, I'll start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do at Community Living Toronto, how you got into this area of work.
Yeah. So I actually started at Community Living Toronto. I say this joke all the time when I was 8 years old, because my mom has worked for Community Living Toronto for years. So I grew up knowing Community Living Toronto in different capacities as a daughter of an employee that was working part-time and then went on to full-time. So I would attend like those picnics and stuff that we used to have back in the 90s. I'm kind of aging myself. And so when it came time for me graduating school and I was looking for a part-time job, I went to where I knew that I'd be very accepted, and I knew the work already. I knew a lot of the clients through growing up, again, through Community Living Toronto. So I started off as relief working in a Etobicoke region, and it was great. And I said, this is an amazing part-time job. And then it just happened before I knew it. I went from part-time to then full-time case manager, and I was working with a lot of our transitional age youth. And because I had a child and youth worker background, it made a lot of sense. And then I was really good at it. I pat myself on the back and they're like, you know what, you have capabilities to be a supervisor. And so I went on to be a supervisor of one of our clustered model group homes, Rogers Road. And I did that for a couple of years during the pandemic, which what I'm most known for. And so with that, I took a leap of faith. I was always interested in working in corporate. I was very keen and interested in strategy and planning because I feel like a lot of work we can't do without that. And so there was an opportunity through an expression of interest where I articulated a lot of work that I did within strategy and planning outside of CLTO. And then I became the manager of strategy and planning and helped us write our current strategy. So that was really great. Simultaneously, I was getting my credentials to be a clinical psychologist. And so my specialization is working with racialized populations. So all the terms that we talk about, especially in spaces where we're talking about equity, diversity, and inclusion, I was doing it within the psychology realm. And so I kind of landed in this role very nicely because I was doing all the research and literature reviews outside of CLTO. Simultaneously, we were picking up our efforts. So when this opportunity came, it just landed very nicely for me and I applied for it and I got it. So
perfect.
That's my long-winded history here at
Now,
CLTO.
as I recall, you were working at a program that was one of our first outbreaks of in COVID, and those were scary times. I think we sort of forget what that was like. And I remember talking to you at the time, you're kind of going, you're working 18 hours a day and trying to figure out what this COVID thing is. And you really jumped in, or you had to jump in with both feet and support your team and the people that we were supporting at that program. That was quite an ordeal.
Yeah, it was.
It was.
Sometimes to see it,
Yeah, yeah. Brittany, yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you landed at Community Living Toronto.
Absolutely. My story isn't as in-depth as my dear friend Lee, and as well as many people who work at Community Living Toronto. I did start here now 3 years ago. My anniversary was December 6th. So
happy anniversary.
Cheers to that. Thank you so much. But I currently work in the fundraising department as the fundraising coordinator for events, community giving, and stewardship. My Community Living Toronto story does actually span back a little bit. Growing up with a cousin who was autistic, as well as a couple of friends, the name Community Living Toronto has always kind of circled around as a place of support and just kind of them being in and out of our families' lives. And so I've always had an inkling of what Community Living Toronto did, but it wasn't until I was a little older when I actually was able to kind of dig a little deeper and find out a little bit more about what Community Living Toronto actually offers and the mission behind it, and hearing the stories, and again, connecting with my family who is still in and out connected to Community Living Toronto. I really gained just appreciation for what Community Living Toronto did. And so when I was given the opportunity to join the team, I was ecstatic because, again, the passion was already there. I was already just so inspired by what Community Living Toronto did within our communities. And I was just so excited to be a part. So I'm happy to be here 3 years strong, and I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Excellent, excellent. Now you've both. So one of the things that Toronto has is an incredibly diverse population, right? I don't know where we rank in terms of cities that have the most or whatever, and I don't know that necessarily matters whether we're the most diverse to the third or the fourth or whatever. But we have an incredibly diverse population, right? People from all over the world come here, and for the most part, we do a pretty good job of making it work. People often feel welcome. Toronto's kind of known for that. We've figured out ways to all live together in a way that often works well. Not always. I'm always struck. You can kind of get stuck sometimes thinking, oh man, we need to do better. And then you go visit some other cities and you recognize, wow, actually we're doing some stuff really pretty good. And Toronto, and Community Living Toronto, being an employer in a large and diverse city like this, one of the things that we've recognized is that our workforce reflects the city that we live in, and people need to feel that sense of welcome and inclusion is happening at their workplace. We haven't always done a great job at that, and one of the things we've tried to do better in the last number of years is support people with whatever background they're from, to make them feel welcomed as employees, to enable them and equip them and make them feel like they're able to contribute to people that we support all across the city, who are also bringing their own vulnerabilities and that. So a long-winded effort to talk about some of the work that we've done with ERGs, which are employee resource groups, which bring people together around common interests or cultures or sexual identity, whatever it might be. And these are employee-led and run, we've got a number that are up and running. We can talk about them more later. But you've both been involved in one that's called the Black Brilliance Network. And tell us a little bit about that. How did it get started? What inspired it? And what is it that you do?
Absolutely. I can take this one if you want. So the Black Brilliance Network really was kind of birthed out of a desire for connection, for just filling in some of the gaps. I say this oftentimes, but being Black in corporate Canada, we often say corporate America, but corporate Canada does have its challenges, and oftentimes can be isolating, right? You don't happen to have a lot of us represented. And so when you do see someone who is either doing the same work or in upper management, there's a sense of joy and a sense of connection, and you understand certain things that your other colleagues just may not understand. And so the Black Brilliance Network really was birthed out of just me seeing the need of us not having that space for Black employees of Community Living Toronto to come together to allow our voices to be heard in certain decisions, certain events that happen in Community Living Toronto, and just giving us that safe space where we can just rest our shoulders, exhale, and share some of our shared experiences. We may work in different departments with different colleagues in different fields altogether, but there's oftentimes a shared experience that we don't oftentimes get a chance to share in our day-to-day lives. And so that's why we decided to come together with the Black Brilliance Network. We launched it in August. Okay. And we have bi-monthly meetings, and we have our first event launch happening the end of February. So that is exciting. Just kind of bringing out who we are and introducing the group to the entire organization. So we're excited for that.
Great. Lee, what's your experience been with this employee resource group and the Black Brilliance Network, and your perspective on the impact that it's having?
Yeah, so as somebody shared sentiment as Brittany, when I came to corporate, I felt very isolated being a young Black woman and just figuring out the nuances, because we need to be transparent. Navigating in corporate is much different than navigating frontline. And there's no handbook to indicate you can do this and no, you can't do that. And I was always scared of messing up and being that person that came from frontline to corporate. And so it was interesting when I first started working in corporate here, people were messaging me saying like, oh my gosh, there's somebody that looks like me. I'm like, oh no, I don't want to be representation. And then I had to really embrace
people from direct people that you'd work with.
Yeah, working frontline really have shown an appreciation for the fact that I represent as a young Black woman in corporate, working in a senior leader position. It doesn't often happen. And so when you meet somebody, it's like, I'm so happy and honored that a lot of people have shared their flowers. And so I've embraced it. And so when Brittany approached me when I was working, now that the role I'm in, technically I can't start ERGs on my own. I've always wanted an ERG such as the Black Brilliance Network, but being in this position, I can't just make one and not have anyone in it. So when Brittany and another colleague of hers approached me about it, I said, oh my gosh, I've always wanted this. And so when we're conceptualizing what it is and what it's not, the one thing that we kind of landed on is being one, representation for others that maybe do not have experience being out in corporate. So there's leadership opportunities, there's mentorship opportunities. People are saying like, hey, like, I'm kind of scared to put myself out there. And so sharing tips and tricks of what you cannot do. And so it's been a really nice space to watch grow. And then also when we talk about the broader community, some people have said, oh, we should create a space for Black people. I'm like, oh, well, one just started up and it exists. Right. So it's really nice to even hear like the next cohort of people that would be interested in this employee resource group. And so when I think right now we have 7 of them, and they represent different identities, different constructs. And so now that we have the Black Brilliance Network, we've been able to map up so much for 2026. Like Brittany said, I'm Black 365 days of the year, depending if it's a leap year or not. And with that being said, we have Mass Abilities looking to come to Community Living Toronto. That's led by Marty Lampkin. She's done a lot of work in the DS sector with regards to the intersection of race and identity of having a disability. So it's really nice to bring an inclusive cultural event to CLTO for the first time. We have a couple of cultural foods that are going to be available at our regional locations. And I'm like, Brittany, this is what I've always wanted. It's like a group of motivated people to just show the diversity amongst Black people in a positive light all year round. And so I'm just very happy to be a part of this and looking forward to all the new steps coming ahead.
That's good. You mentioned a couple of the other ERGs that we have, and I think we've got 6 or 7 altogether. But like as an example, we've got the Pride Collective representing the LGBTQ staff members and individuals at CL Toronto, the Indigenous Talking Circle, and also Muslims of CLTO. And each is sort of finding its way and doing its own. There's no sort of prescription here. People, the idea is to make people feel welcomed and make space. You've been at this, what's this, about 6 months now, 5 months. What's some of the impacts that you've noticed from from the first few months of getting things going? Brittany, I'll start with you.
Absolutely. Some of the impacts that I've seen is just the coming together. Oftentimes in Black communities, we'll have, or in the diaspora, I'll say, we'll have Caribbeans on one side, you'll have West Africans on the other side, you'll have East Africans on the other side. And to the broader audience, people won't really know the difference. But within the diaspora, there's such nuance, right? And so what I've actually enjoyed watching is seeing all the different subgroups of the diaspora kind of come together in one common cause and almost become like one little family with one common mission. And just opening up to one another and kind of breaking a lot of those barriers, I think has been just amazing.
That's excellent. Lee, anything you'd add to that?
Yeah, I think the beautiful thing about ERGs is, like you said, Brad, there's no prescription of what they can be and what they can't be. It's kind of led by the employees and then supported by myself. I think sometimes it is hard to sustain some of these groups and bring them together because they are doing a lot of this work on the side of their desk. And so just making time and then also being very intentional and giving people grace and understanding sometimes they can show up and sometimes they cannot. And that is not a true reflection of people's wanting to be part of this space or not wanting to be part of this space. And so I'd like to highlight that it is when we create employee resource group, ideally we want them self-sufficient and running all year round. But the reality is a lot of people are doing this work on the side of a desk. Depending on the nature of their work, it can be very taxing. And so there's times that people are in and then they take their step out, and that is completely okay. And so,
right. Yeah. Good. One of the things that is central to what we do, and one of our strategic goals, is putting the people that we support out in front of what we do, and putting people we support, people with an intellectual disability, front and center. So what's the benefit been to individuals with a disability, whether they live with us residentially, whether they're in a supported living location or something that's more intensive, or they're connected with our CPS locations or any one of the case management services that we offer? What's the benefit to people we support from groups like the Black Brilliance Network and some of the other ERGs? How does that help? How does that help do what we do better?
Yeah, Brittany, want me to go first? It's okay.
Yeah.
It can help in a number of ways. When we talk about employee resource groups, of course, we're speaking to employees. But when we talk about when we're in a workplace where we feel heard, belong, and seen, and we want to show up to work, that impacts morale, that impacts work ethic, that impacts the way we show up for the people we support. And so I like to position my work as not this singular, I'm only supporting and my work only supports employees. My work also supports the people we support, because when we think about diversity, it doesn't only exist within CLTO employees. It's also like CRM really highlighted. I extracted some data from CRM to really show, like, hey, this is a color wheel to illustrate the diversity that we have amongst the people.
CRM is our database for it. Yes. So getting a sense of who we support where they're from, what their interests might be, what their backgrounds are,
their cultural backgrounds, etc. And so when we talk about not only creating being an employer of choice, we want to be an organization of choice. And when we center the people we support, so when we're catering to understanding our audience, understanding their cultural background, their family dynamics, their religion, and we're putting forth that effort into the services we provide, we're taking them into consideration. And so that's when services become more effective. That becomes, our services are more relevant to what they're doing on the day-to-day. So it's not the singular work that we're doing. So when we talk about the Black Brilliance Network and creating spaces for employees to belong, the learnings that we're getting from these spaces, they can be translated easily to the day-to-day work that we're doing with the
Right.
people we support, the families. The families love to hear the work that we're doing in CLTO, especially with our EDI efforts. And then a lot of our events that we're having, like for example, the Mass Abilities, that's not only open to our staff, that is staff and the people we support are both invited. And so it's a collaborative event where we're both enjoying these spaces and we're both learning together and we're both growing together. And so, yeah, I would see that as the biggest benefit of all these ERGs is when we create opportunities to learn, those learnings then translate to our day-to-day work. And then when we have events to celebrate, we're inviting the people we support to these events. And so they're learning about culture, they're learning about religion. And then I think anyone that has an open world view, that just makes the space more welcoming. So, yeah.
Excellent. Brittany, did you have any thoughts on sort of how the ERGs and the inclusive workplace cultures that that we're trying to create and doing so through groups like the Black Brilliance Network, how they benefit people that we support?
Absolutely. I think Lee, you did a great job to touch on a lot of it. But I think even going back to what we talk about being in corporate Canada or even just the workforce in general, oftentimes assimilation is seen as survival, right? And so we don't get oftentimes to be the chance to be our most authentic selves, and then we don't bring that to our work, right? And so one of the ways that I see us being able to help the people that we support is being able to just show up as our most authentic selves, being able to highlight our culture, share our culture, but also encouraging the people that we support to also enjoy and celebrate and live freely within their culture. Not just culture, but also events that happen within the world that affect us, right? There are so many things that are happening in Nigeria, for example, that affect our employees, but also the people that we support deeply. And
Right.
oftentimes we don't feel like we can talk about these things because it's not happening here, right? It's not well known within our Canadian culture. But being able to share some of these highs and some of these lows, and leaving that space open, not just for ourselves to be grounded within ourselves, but allow the people that we touch to also share in that experience. I think it's amazing. We've just started, but I think the sky's the limit for this.
Okay. So, and you make a great point, and I'd like to come back to that point you made around assimilation is seen as survival. I'd love to get a bit more of your thoughts on that. And again, I find these days with social media and just the world feels very chaotic, and there's a lot of information that's coming at us every day, and we tend to focus on the news that is more local or related to America these days, right?
Yeah.
But you make a great point that there's a lot going on in Nigeria, and other parts of Africa and the Caribbean. Well, there's a lot going on in the Caribbean right now that might be top of mind for somebody whose background is from there, that we may not be as tuned into when they're coming to work. So giving that space and that opportunity for people for us to recognize that, yeah, not all news is local, that people are paying attention to news from all over the place, and that can have an impact on how they're arriving at work, what they're feeling, and us being open to making sure there's space for people to fit in.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned this term, and I'd like you to talk about it a bit at the risk of putting you on the spot. This idea of assimilation is seen as survival. What talk about that?
Absolutely. So when we enter into these doors, there's a lot of things that kind of come to mind, whether it's the way that we look, whether it's the way that we talk, whether it's the way that we just kind of present ourselves. Oftentimes, we almost morph into what we feel is needed or expected of us. And if we kind of show up as our more authentic selves, oftentimes that is seen as, especially for Black women, this is an often issue, but we'll be assertive, and will be seen as aggressive, as an example, right? Whereas when we're with our people, we understand how each other talk, right?
Right.
Also, again, the way that we carry our hair, like our hair, our food, things of that nature, oftentimes we feel that we do need to kind of follow step by step what is happening within the typical Canadian, or what is seen as the default Canadian culture, which is very different from ours, right? And in order for us to kind of stay in line and stay connected to our colleagues, we feel that we have to almost mimic, and who we are and our most authentic doesn't get recognized as well.
Okay. Lee, do you have anything to add to that?
Brittany captured it very nicely.
Okay.
I feel the same way. Oftentimes, and when it comes to appearance, it's really big, especially for Black women. It's like, what is okay, what is not. My hair is not straight, but I feel like I need to wear straight hair. And then Brad, in the beginning of our conversation, we're saying we're new to corporate. People are like, hey, a Black woman in corporate, there's a reason for that. And I always tell people, like, corporate, as much as we don't want to admit it, is socially constructed. And it was constructed by people that do not look like me. And all the rules and regulations were meant to keep people that look like me, either one, uncomfortable to stay in this space, or two, just overall put a whole bunch of rules to regulate, like, hey, if you don't follow this, then obviously you don't belong. And so when you see people like Brittany and I sitting in corporate roles, it's kind of like you survive that. And that's the term that she's saying, because the idea is like there's so many rules and regulations that are so different from who we are naturally. Like, it takes a very strong person to be able to show up in that space and do their job properly. And the reality is not a lot of people survive. It's like corporate, being in corporate and navigating corporate nuances literally deters them out. And then they're like, I can't do it anymore. And so it's very sad. And so I think that's where a lot of my work comes in as well, where when we're saying like, hey, these are just standard processes. And I'm like, but who made them? Like, where did it come from? Do we sit down and question, why do we do the things that we do? And why is it that certain people that look certain ways always feel uncomfortable when we're engaging in this process where others don't? And so that's why I was invite from that perspective, is like, just think, when does it feel uncomfortable for you and when it doesn't? And usually when I talk to my counterparts, they're like, yeah, that didn't feel uncomfortable for me. I'm like, well, for me, I'll tell you a whole different story. So yeah, those are some of my sentiments with regards
That's
to
helpful.
that.
So in terms of, and again, I'm an older white guy with privilege that I recognize. And again, people often are wanting to do the right thing, say the right thing, be welcoming, be inclusive. And it sounds like a lot of the times, or some of the times at least, we're coming up short. What tips do you have for people like me to make things more welcoming, or what does anything come to mind?
A lot comes to mind. I'll let Brittany go first.
Absolutely. I enjoyed what you said earlier, Brad, in terms of just kind of navigating all of these things. But what we had talked about before, about kind of approaching things with a lot of curiosity versus a lot of assumption, or making assumptions based off of just minor things, I think goes a long way. But also kind of touching on the very common theme of we don't see color, I think is also very problematic, because we are different and there are so many differences, even like in nuances. And that's something that should be celebrated instead of not seeing color, because oftentimes when we don't see color, the default isn't us, right? The default becomes white Canada and that culture. And so enjoying the differences that we have and celebrating the differences that we have, I think, is important, instead of kind of pretending that they aren't there. And then also giving the benefit of the doubt where we may not understand each other, and that is okay. Let's sit down and have the conversations, versus, again, making your own assumptions off of what you may or may not understand. I think it's important.
Okay. And it sounds like there's an openness for many people to accept or be receptive to curiosity. The flip side to that, though, is do some of your own research, I'm assuming, because, again, not everybody's role in the workplace or at large is to be the educator of people that may not know something. I mentioned this earlier when we were starting to do some work around Indigenous reconciliation and our role in Truth and Reconciliation Canada. I would often refer to people people as being Aboriginal. And again, it was just, I didn't put much thought into it. I probably knew I was stumbling over the words. But when I started to do some reading, took some courses, did some work, that the correct term would be Indigenous, right? So again, I went around for years either offending people or just kind of having people look at me and go, that guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. And nobody corrected me. Nobody came up and said, no, that's not the right word. But I'm sure that people were kind of going, oh man, that didn't feel good. So I do, as much as I think that openness to receiving people's curiosity, there is also an obligation to do some work and understand things for yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even touching on that point, the term Aboriginal was taught in school. So oftentimes, many of us grew up with that language. But even being able to do your own research, as you mentioned, and having these conversations with people that actually identify, I think helps to give a broader picture as to what it really is. And again, people want to have these conversations, but they don't want to, like you mentioned, they don't want to have the burden of educating everybody, right? So I appreciate you saying that.
Good. Lee, I want to change topics or tracks a little bit. One of the things that you've been involved with is a community of practice. So our community living organizations and others around the province are part of some member organizations. And there's been a community of practice, so sort of agencies coming together to talk about good ideas and things that are working around this issue. Do you want to talk about that work and the community of practice?
Yeah. So I'm actually a chair of one of our subcommittees, the knowledge transfer. So the community of practice has been around for several years, and at this point, it's pretty large. A lot of people across the DS sector have come together to share ideas, share resources, their EDI efforts. It's even translated to actual tangible resources on a website known as the Real Exchange, where we have a specific tab for EDI resources. This goes anywhere from EDI statements that others are currently using that organizations are starting up. They can use it as well. Policies. Also, we used to do a lot of like lunch and learn, so the recordings of that. One of the new evolutions of it is we have a tab for Indigenous resources that was actually vetted by Community Living Six Nations to ensure that the research is relevant, the documents are applicable. And then a new thing, coincidentally, we're on a podcast right now. We're looking to start up a 6-part series through the subcommittee that I'm leading. And it's really to speak to understanding that DS, it's not too clear of where everyone's at. We're all not on the same level when it comes to our EDI efforts, and that is completely okay. Whether you're at a point right now where you're like, hey, we've been chugging through this for the past couple of years, it's kind of dying down. How do I revamp and sustain? Or I actually haven't started anything and I want to, but what are small tangible steps? So we're looking to do a 6-part series to really help DS organizations really start or sustain their EDI efforts. So stay tuned for that. And then we have a symposium that's coming up March 10th. So everyone is welcome. You can register through the Real Exchange. So
what's the symposium? Talk about that.
So the symposium, again, back to the notion of really recognizing the current climate that we're in right now. Some organizations actually have stopped their EI efforts. Some are struggling to like what's next. We've done a lot of foundational stuff. And so a lot of opportunity for conversation to, again, talking about ways in which organizations such as Community Living Toronto that are still going at it, what are some things that we're doing and what do we have to offer? So that's the theme. It's like currently right now in this current climate, what can DS organizations really do and why this is still meaningful and that we should not give up on it despite whatever's happening across the border.
Yeah, no, that's good. And it is a fair question that anything we do and invest time and effort in and money, that there needs to be some return on that, right? And the way we thought about it is there needs to be a return on investment, right? So you talk about employees being more motivated, wanting to come to work, more feeling like they belong, doing better work because they feel like they're accepted and there's space for them in the workplace. The other thing is return on mission, that we want to be a welcoming workplace because we want to create welcoming communities. And that starts at home. That starts with us when people come to work. How do they feel? And that's hard to get at for organizations like ours that are often under-resourced or, can't offer some things that larger organizations, corporate sort of Canada, can. So we're constantly sort of making sure that we try and get that balance right. Final thoughts. This it'll be February when people are listening to this, and Black History Month. Brittany, I'll go to you in terms of curiosity. Anything you'd point people towards if they're curious that they might find interesting? Is there a website or a book or a speaker or anything that you would suggest people have a look at? You don't have to tell the whole thing, but just sort of a teaser for people to dive into. And I recognize I'm putting you on the spot, so if you and I'm really just asking for myself. Is there anything you suggest I look at?
Absolutely. So in terms of, just for clarity, in terms of the Black Brilliance Network, or just getting to know Black Canadians in general?
Up to you.
Okay. So in terms of the Black Brilliance Network, we are launching our newsletter shortly. So that should be out by the end of the month. And then I encourage everyone to come out to Mass Abilities. It'll be an amazing time for us just to really get a little bit more understanding as to who we are, but also just Black culture in general.
Okay.
And then in terms of just understanding your Black colleagues and all that good stuff, there are just a plethora of resources right here in Community Living Toronto. Have the conversations. There are books in the library of Black historians. Read up on those. There's so much resources out there that it's almost impossible not to be able to turn around and find something. I also would highly, highly suggest that you seek out small Black businesses. There are a plethora in the city of Toronto that are either selling online or in person, brick and mortar. But even going there and kind of having the conversations with the people there, oftentimes these small businesses will talk about their experience being Black in Canada. They'll talk about their culture. They'll talk about their passions and desires. And you'll get a broader understanding of who we are, just kind of talking to people and hearing their stories.
Great. Lee, anything you'd point people towards, or any suggestions you've got?
Internally, our SharePoint site, every month I upload events, resources. So if anyone in CLTO is, in addition to everything Brittany said, internally we'll have a list of resources, books, activities you can do throughout the month, and then Black businesses that you can support. So I encourage everyone to go to our AREDI SharePoint site and see all of them.
Great. Thank you both for taking the time to chat with us today. Thanks for your work on the Black Brilliance Network, and for how for all the work that you do at Community Living Toronto. We're lucky to have you both, and appreciate the contributions and your willingness to put yourselves out there in a way that can sometimes be vulnerable. And you've done that, and we're better for it. Thank you.
Absolutely, we appreciate it.
Thank you for listening, watching, and sharing. We release a new episode of Community Chats on the 15th and the 30th of each month, so don't forget to subscribe to stay up to date.